It's the real news. I'm Aaron Mate. Another day brings more news in the probe of President Donald Trump's ties to Russia. The Washington Post reports U.S. government investigators have identified a White House official as a person of interest. The official is said to be a senior Trump advisor. I'm joined now by James Henry, an economist and attorney who has been reporting on Trump's ties to Russia. Mr. Henry, welcome.
Good to be here.
So there's two facets to this whole Trump-Russia issue. There's the collusion issue, whether or not him and his campaign colluded with the Russian government during the presidential election. And then there's the issue that goes way back further about Trump's financial dealings with Russian interests. Now, before we get to that, let's talk about the pace so far of the collusion investigation, including this latest news now we have that a person of interest in the case is a senior White House official. What's your assessment so far of how the investigation into alleged Trump-Russian collusion is going?
Well, we've had quite an exciting 2 weeks here. The president has, not only fired Comey, but he's tipped to Russians a piece of intelligence that apparently came from at least one of our closest allies, maybe two have been mentioned. And then he's made all kinds of comments that I can't imagine anyone who looks at them objectively will think that they're really going to clear the air here. He's described the appointment of the special counsel this week, Robert Mueller, as a continuation of a witch hunt, claiming that he's the kind of the worst example of a witch hunt in American history. I mean, obviously he's not read much about the McCarthy era. He should go back to the 17th century and read about the Salem witch trials. This is a president who is embattled, and I think he's probably believed to be flying to Israel and Saudi Arabia this weekend. The appropriate thing would be for him to clear the air here and to start cooperating with these investigations. I think, in an odd way, the appointment of Robert Mueller, who's someone that has a lot of respect in both major political parties, is a way of putting this issue to rest for a while and having a breather. I think the American people are approaching a bit of fatigue about it. Those of us who have looked at all of the issues across, both the financial scandals and the collusion issue, have basically, apart from getting leaks from inside grand juries, we've got the issues out there about as far as we can go in the journalism community. We need now to have people with subpoena power, like Mueller, or like congressional committees, to actually do some investigating and to get into the details of all this. The problem I have with the Mueller appointment is simply that it could take, first of all, a very long time to get to the bottom of this stuff. Previous special counsels or special prosecutors have taken their number of years, so this could be unresolved for a long time. And secondly, the scope of his investigation may not reach some of the financial chicanery that we've identified as an important potential issue here. But, that remains to be seen.
Okay, so before we get to the financial issue, which I know you've looked at extensively, let's talk a bit more about the collusion probe. You mentioned subpoenas. The same Washington Post report that I mentioned about a White House official being named a person of interest, it reports that that subpoenas are expected to be issued relatively soon as this investigation picks up. But let me put to you the fact that there still is no hard evidence of collusion. When even Democratic lawmakers like Dianne Feinstein are asked about this, they say that they've seen to date, after all these months, after all these leaks, after all this investigation, still no evidence of collusion. What does that tell you?
It tells me that a lot of this evidence is classified and is only going to be subject to review by behind closed doors or by real investigators.
But they're not saying. If I may, information, they're saying they haven't seen evidence.
Yeah,
they're saying there's no evidence that they've seen of collusion.
I don't think that's accurate, that they have seen no evidence. We have 17 intelligence agencies, and at least 3 of them took a hard look at this stuff, and they did conclude that, first of all, the Russians did try to hack the elections. There's an extraordinary number of interactions on the part of senior members of the administration, from Jeff Sessions and Carter Page and Michael Flynn, who was his head of national security. Paul Manafort, who is Trump's campaign advisor. The list goes on, and I think it's just hard to account for that kind of degree of interaction over a sustained period of time. So there's plenty of smoke pouring out of this basement. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
I think smoke is the key word. I'm making what I think is a pretty uncontroversial statement, which that after all this time, we still have not seen hard evidence of Trump-Russia collusion. I would like to move on, though, to the issue of financial dealings between Trump and Russia. You studied this extensively. There was just a report in the Wall Street Journal about the Russian state-owned development bank, VEB, financing a Russian-Canadian developer who built the Trump Hotel in Toronto. This is among many sketchy financial links tying Trump to Russia. Can you comment on this one and let's talk about the broader context here for Trump-Russia money?
Yeah, I think that the thing I was trying to account for in the articles I've been writing about the origins of Trump and his relationship to Russian and former Soviet Union money is how Donald Trump was able to finance his business recovery after the year 2000, when he'd had basically 6 bankruptcies in the 1990s. No U.S. bank would lend to him. The only bank that would lend to him was Deutsche Bank, which has close ties to President Putin. And so he was, I think, in a situation where he was able to profit in project after project from the fact that Russian flight capital was pouring out, and also countries like Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. You had oligarchs and kleptocrats who were willing to, looking for safe havens for their assets. So they really, in project after project, the Canadian tower that they built, the tallest building in Canada, turns out to be an example of that. Here you had a Russian state-owned bank that basically arranged to get a loan to a company that we don't know who owns it, but they bought a huge steel mill from a Canadian of Russian origin, who then turned around and made a deal almost very quickly with Donald Trump, paid him $15 million for a license, and they proceeded to produce this Trump Tower, which has just gone bankrupt this year, like most of his projects have done. That's another case of where we need more investigation, but the article I wrote in the American Interest back in December had identified this Canadian partner as worthy of investigation because of his ties to lots of interesting people in Russia. And now it turns out that Putin, who was chairman of this bank, extended $800 million to do a favorable buyout to him shortly before he did the deal with Trump. So, we see the similar kind of thing going on in Trump's Soho in Midtown Manhattan. We see the projects in Panama, the Ocean Club, his biggest project in the world, where some of the investors in those projects turn out to be basically moving lots of shady money abroad. And that's a pattern that I think reflects poorly on the president's business judgment. He seems to have turned to these people without kind of a blind eye to their business background. Whether it went beyond that, whether he was actually deceiving investors, those are all questions that investigators and grand juries have to determine.
In terms of what is out there in public right now that you think people should be focusing on if they're interested in connecting Trump financially to Russia, what should people be keeping their eye on? I know also there was a Dutch documentary recently purporting to probe Trump's ties to organized crime of some kind.
One of them you just mentioned is the Dutch public television network, goes by the name of Zembla on Twitter, Zembla. But there's links on their Twitter site to their Dutch documentary, which is, they have 2 hour-long documentaries on Donald Trump and his Russian connections, which I think come highly recommended. German public television, ZDF network is going to is producing another documentary that will be aired around the end of this month. It's ironic that the lead in these issues has been established by foreign documentary producers, and these are outstanding documentaries. There's another one by the BBC that's in the works. But we have so far not heard much from Frontline or from CBS 60 Minutes or ABC News, Brian Ross, the people you usually would turn to. And I think it's a fair question to ask why U.S. media, broadcast media, has been so remiss in terms of covering all of these connections. But we do have those outstanding documentaries that are really worth watching if you want to get up to speed on the financial crimes aspect of the story.
Well, just to answer your question and to connect it to my earlier point, perhaps it's because the media here is overly focused on trying to find some evidence of collusion between Russia and Trump when it comes to the campaign. We have to leave it there, though. James Henry, economist and attorney. Okay, go ahead with your final comment.
Final comment. I think you're exactly right. To some extent, American journalism has got used to the kind of model of investigative journalism that Woodward and Bernstein pioneered, admirably back in the 1970s, where you basically were a kind of conveyor belt for things that, in that case, senior FBI agents wanted to tell you. And that's good up to a point, but in this case, I'm afraid it's going to take much more hard, kind of gumshoe journalism, going out and getting people to tell you things that they really oughtn't tell you. And that's what investigative reporting at its best is really all about.
James Henry, economist, attorney, investigative journalist who's been following the Trump-Russia connection, especially the paper trail when it comes to money. James, thanks for joining us.
Very welcome. Thanks very much.
And thank you for joining us on The Real News.